Hello and welcome to How Books Are Made, a podcast about the art and science of making books. I'm Arthur Atwell. About 10 years ago, our family room was half filled with boxes and boxes of books. In each of those boxes were 20 copies of one truly beautiful children's book that I'd published. It was a large, colourful hardcover edition with end papers and a thick, silky dust jacket. I loved that book so much that I printed 3,000 copies with money I borrowed from the bank. And in the months that followed, I learned, not for the first time and not for the last, that I am very, very bad at marketing books. In the end, I sold 250 copies, and then lived with those boxes piled to our ceiling for more than a year. At one stage much later, I used stacks of them as the legs of our office boardroom table as a monument to my hubris. Eventually, and happily, I found a children's book charity to take them as a donation. Marketing is one of the great mysteries of publishing to me. People who can build brands and inspire communities of fans around books are nothing less than alchemists, even more so when they write their books too. And so, for this first episode of How Books Are Made, I wanted to speak to one of these alchemists. Sam Beckbessinger is the best-selling author of Manage Your Money Like an Effing Grown-Up, a book, and now a website, and a growing brand that spans countries. She also writes horror stories, and on hugely popular kids' TV shows, and was one of the writers on Cereal Box and Marvel's Jessica Jones Playing with Fire serialized novel. I've known Sam for a while, and we've made books together for children's publisher Book Dash. She is irrepressibly joyful and optimistic, which is something we all need a dose of right now. To kick off our conversation, I asked Sam how Manage Your Money had come to be.
So I was working at 20-7, which is a personal financial management app. Must have been probably, 5 years ago now. And I was finding it really satisfying because it was solving a problem that I really care about, which is, money is this terrifying thing and no one teaches anyone how money works. Had never been taught and was trying to figure it out. And I felt like I had learned so much in the process of working at this company and being surrounded by other people who were thinking and talking about money all the time, that I kind of just was filled with this information that I was desperate to share. So I just started writing some blog posts that kind of summarized everything that I had learned. And I called it How to Manage Your Money Like an Effing Grown-Up, which felt like a lighthearted, fun title for blog posts. Would never have been what I would have called a book. And then the weekend after I wrote those blog posts, I got involved in this tiny, really interesting little project that you might have heard of called Book Dash, Arthur. And at Book Dash, I wrote a book called Hipper Wants to Dance, which remains my favorite thing I've ever written. And my editor was none other than Esther Levenrod.
No ways.
Incredibly amazing Esther, who worked for Jonathan Ball Publishers. And we met at Book Dash and we started chatting and we got on really well. And I mentioned to Esther that, hey, I'd been working on these blog posts because how the heck does money? How is money, And she was like, oh, that sounds cool. I should read them. And then she read them and then she commissioned a book for me. So actually, all of this is your fault.
Yeah, it's amazing. I can't believe Book Dash led to that book. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was a little serendipitous meeting. And it was this funny thing because, there is this real question of when does something need to be a book? When is it a better home inside, printed paper and old trees? And a lot of turning it into a book was kind of uncomfortable for me because I'm someone who's been a blogger for a long time and I've podcasted for a long time. And those are all mediums where you can change your mind and you can keep refining things. And as you learn more, you can keep updating everything and adding to the body of knowledge and revising. And the weird thing about putting it all in a book was that it crystallized everything at that moment in time in a way that was incredibly helpful and powerful for me as a thinking tool, but also has been very odd because already now, a couple of years later, there are parts of the book that where my thinking is progressed a little bit or where I've learned more about these topics. And you can't go back and just update the book. The book exists. It has a complete life of its own now. But it also went much further and I think helped many more people being in book form than it ever would have if it had just stayed a Medium post.
Yeah, there's something about that crystallizing, I like that word, in a book that is obviously what we all love about books. And yet somehow something about the zeitgeist of everything being, all knowledge must be 100% up to date, kind of is at odds with that desire to crystallize something and have it set, at least briefly, in stone. That we haven't really resolved that yet in the world of publishing.
I mean, kind of how I've dealt with it with the money book is in the book, I included the website link. And I said in the book, anything that goes out of date quite quickly, I'm not going to put in the book. I'm going to put on the website. So that I kind of hedged my bets a little bit. So there are some kind of companion pieces to the book that just work better as living, breathing documents, like the live list of what are good bank accounts, or, where can you, if you should actually open a savings account, what is a good savings account to open? Those are things that exist on the website. And that's been a pretty good compromise, I think.
Yeah, the book seems to have some kind of tribe of true fans. Did you have to build that tribe from scratch? I mean, my sense is that nothing happens accidentally, and books in and of themselves don't create tribes. You have to still do a whole lot of hard work. And some of that, you share with your publisher, and some of it you just have to get done yourself. I remember when we spoke, when the book was still in production, you were still thinking through how you were going to actually promote and market the thing. What was that journey like?
So I think this is something that I didn't realize before I published the book, is that your job as a writer, I would say a full 50% of it is marketing, which is terrible because I would much rather write another book than market a book that already exists. It's the part of the job I find the most stressful. I have a new book coming out, a new money book coming out in September 1st, which is a teen version of the money book. The mouth washed out with soap version is what I'm calling it. And yeah, so I'm like back on this ride again, and kind of dreading it, honestly. But there are parts of it that are really fun. So I guess my approach to marketing was, as I do everything, was throw a bunch of things at the wall and see what sticks. I had never released a book before, so I didn't know what would work. So I tried a bunch of things that did not work. So the things that did not work for me were social media was one thing. I know that there are some writers who really it's quite a natural space for them engaging on social media, and it's kind of an extension of who they are. And it's very easy for them to build a tribe and kind of continue a conversation with people in that platform. Social media is just not a thing that I do naturally in my day-to-day life. So trying it was incredibly artificial and it just didn't work. It didn't connect. I had a whole bunch of people sign up for Facebook pages, but then I just didn't know how to have a conversation with people. The thing that really did work that was the most powerful, was the email list. And it was something where from the first day that the book was released, I built a website for it, and it had an email sign up form. And I didn't do anything with that email list for a full year and a half after the book came out. I just had this feeling of, this could come in handy one day, maybe. And I got that piece of advice actually from some of my friends in indie video game development. It's a very similar space being an indie game developer, because increasingly, while the publishing industry does do so much to help promote a book, more and more it really is down to what the writer does, I think. And that's as true for indie games. And I'd heard from them, the problem with relying on these social platforms is that you're reliant on the whims of Mark Zuckerberg and changing algorithms, and none of the stuff is in your control, and it can all be changed and it can all be taken away whenever they feel like it. So it's really important to own your community and to really start deepening the relationship with the people who really do care about your work from day one. And that was just the most powerful piece of advice that I got, really. So I started building the email database before I really knew what to do with it. But over the years, that has been really the center of of everything, because the relationship that I have with the people that I email, and I try and email them every week. We kind of have this weekly newsletter thing now. Those are the people who connect deeply with the book, and it's quite a bi-directional conversation. They email me, they ask me questions. I try to respond to as many of them as I can, and that's having that core group of people who are very connected to my work has been so much more useful than having a much larger group of people who are kind of just social media followers. And that's the thing that I've learned is really just to nurture and to make sure that you are offering really good value to the community that is building around what you're doing. That's my approach to marketing. What you do is you just have to be incredibly helpful. Just be as helpful as you can and give as much as you have space for. And that's what kind of builds the people around your work who will help you in turn to promote it and to share it and to build it into something bigger.
Yeah, you've really had to kind of empower them to be the word of mouth. They're not going to do it without you giving them some tools to share and something to get excited about. You've also had to get like super committed to this project. I mean, you've really built an empire around it. Did that ever feel like a prison, or was that always just an exciting new area to keep exploring, or both?
No, definitely. And I think the answer is definitely both. I think this often happens where your commitments always are responsibilities, right? And the commitments that you make to yourself and the commitments that you make to other people, I believe in honoring them. So there are people who have done so much for me and have made so much of a difference to my life and my ability to be a writer as a career, that I owe them kind of what they've come to me for. And mostly what people have come to me for is, really connecting with me around talking about money. Problem is, I find talking about money often a bit boring. And I think what has been really interesting has been trying to explore the edges of what are the things that I can talk about with the community that's where it still feels like I'm honoring the agreement that we have in this space, but that kind of stretch what it is. So, over in the first sort of year of the email newsletter, it was very much around personal finances. And when I launched the podcast a year ago with Chronicle and Diana Neal and that team, that was largely around seeing if we could add in other topics about adulting. So kind of start talking about fitness, or start talking about relationships or emotional skills or interpersonal skills or other things that I care about and other things I was interested in learning. And happily, people responded really well to that. And then kind of in the last year, I've really even tried to push it a bit further, which is, the other stuff that I really care about writing is fiction. And it's a bit of a difficult, it does sort of feel like I'm reneging on the contract with my readers to some extent, where I say, yeah, I know you came to me because you were really interested in money skills, and now I'm telling you about this ridiculous YA horror novel that I'm writing about body snatchers. I know it's kind of not what you're here for. But I guess you have a choice in that situation. You can either fragment your community and you can say, okay, cool, this is kind of, I'm going to build a brand around the money stuff, and the money stuff is just going to be the money stuff, and I'm going to build a new brand around the other things I want to do. And I think that probably would be the quote unquote better way from it with a marketing hat on. But I also have just wanted to trust my readers that part of what they're connecting with is me as a person. And that I'd rather maintain just the smaller core of them who will come on this ride with me and are interested in, the fact that financial freedom to me means freedom to write ridiculous fiction, that's an interesting journey for them as well. And I would rather liberate myself from that own expectation and bring a smaller group of them with me on that journey than continue to build up the like a grown-up empire as an empire and feel trapped in it forever.
Maybe less in like an If Grown Up, but more I've seen in the other projects. You're also a keen collaborator back from the early podcast day with sort of Simon Dingle and with the fiction now. And, you mentioned that the book came out of conversation with Esther Levenrad. It sounds like you're someone who unlocks new possibilities because you find these people to work with.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, I mean, for me, my joy of writing, and writing really is my joy. It's my deep love, and a big part of that joy is the playfulness of it. I love the playfulness of learning something new and trying to figure out what you believe about something. And I love the playfulness of bouncing ideas around with other people. And I love the sense of, we can create something far more interesting together than what you could create alone. Like nothing about the money book could have happened if I hadn't had an incredible team behind me. Like the money book wouldn't have happened if Esther hadn't seen the possibility for it. And if Jonathan Ball hadn't, as a whole team, kind of really jumped on board and promoted it as well as they did and been so passionate about championing it amongst the bookstores. They really just turned it into something bigger. And then other people came on, and I think my attitude to all of this is it really has worked when it's been based on an authentic connection and off friendship, right? So all of these things really have come out of me just wanting to hang out with my buddies. Making the podcast was because, I've known Diana since university days, Diana Neal from Chronicle, and we just wanted to hang out together and make something. The novel that I'm writing currently is with, one of my best friends, Dale Halverson. And it's just a great excuse to sit around and make each other laugh and gross each other out and do that thing. It's why I love TV as well. TV writing is very collaborative. Yeah, it's so much fun. It really, really is. I literally can't imagine anything I'd rather be doing with my time.
Amazing. Yeah, I remember you and I had coffee many months ago and talked about what it would look like to get a team of people to write fiction in the way that TV is written.
Yes.
Was that before or after you started working on the Marvel Serial Box Jessica Jones project?
It was kind of very much something that led into that project. So, you and I had this amazing conversation where we were talking about why can't we write more novels in a collaborative way where you have a showrunner and you have a team of writers? Because I had just started working with Sunrise Productions on Team J and had started playing in the animation space. And I was like, this is so much fun. Why do people not write novels like this? And then through that route, became aware of a company called Serial Box, which is one of the really interesting fiction innovators. And they are essentially doing exactly that. They're creating serialized fiction. And then they had, unbeknownst to me, had just signed an agreement with Marvel. And the first one that they brought out was Thor. And then they brought out a Jessica Jones story, which I was incredibly, incredibly lucky to be able to be part of writing. And it was just indescribably fun. And writing for Marvel was incredible because not only are you collaborating with the other writers who are on the project, so I think there were 5 of us who were writing that story, but any Marvel story that you write is also inherently fan fiction in a way, because so many other writers have touched that character and told stories about that character and developed the world. The world has such clear rules and boundaries, and it's so richly populated. So not only are you collaborating with the people in the room with you, but you're also collaborating with sort of virtually with everyone else who's ever told a Jessica Jones story. And that's
amazing.
Oh, it was so good. It was so good. It was so fun.
And how does it actually work in practice? Like, are you sending each other drafts on email? Are you on a video call swapping ideas, or what does that process look like?
Both. I mean, so it ran very much like how a TV writing room runs. So we started off in the same room together, threshing, sort of breaking the story. So figuring out what the key beats were, figuring out who the characters were and what kind of story we wanted to tell, kind of just figuring out the main skeleton of the plot. And then from there, the story was broken down and into sections. We sort of figured out where the main sections were and assigned them to individuals. And then we as individuals went and wrote our own chapters. So I wrote chapters 9 to 12, basically. And two of those chapters I wrote sort of quite independently. And then two of them I wrote with Zoe Quinn, who's also just an incredible writer. And the solo ones was more kind of, I went off and because you know where you have to begin the scene and you know where you have to end the scene, and because we'd worked that all out together in the room, there's still an enormous amount of exploration that you can do in getting from A to Z. And then, of course, it just went through many, many, many rounds of iteration. And we worked with Helen Moffat, who was the editor, who's just, the most incredible editor I've ever worked with. Yeah, I mean, just the best team. And she has that incredible eye for, making sure that everything is building in a logical and coherent way, that the characters' actions make sense between all these different scenes that we built. And then we kind of just rewrote over and over until it all kind of made sense. And it was a very enlightened way to write a book. And I think more people should do it.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. It's also incredible that particular team could come together. I don't know Zoe, but Lauren Bickers was on the team, right?
Yeah, she was the showrunner.
And then of course Helen Moffat, who I've known for decades.
Yeah.
That's a dream team and a half. Did that team come together naturally, perhaps around Lauren?
Lauren, as the showrunner, brought in myself and brought in Helen. The original producer of the story had assembled the rest of the team. And what was really amazing as well is it's the kind of team that would never normally have been able to work together were it not for Serial Box just being really open to ways of collaborating remotely. So there were only 3 days when everyone was together in the same room. Beyond that, we had a lot of email exchanges and a couple of video calls. But these were writers mostly from the US. Zoe, for a lot of the time we were working, was based in Japan. And that was also just incredibly fun, getting to work with people that we wouldn't have been able to. Thank goodness we'd already established that way of working by the time COVID happened. And thank goodness we'd already broken the story together, because most of the writing happened when we were all quarantined in different countries and different parts of the world, but it didn't interrupt our flow at all. So that was pretty amazing.
I'm curious to dig in a little bit more about working with Serial Box. I think that their combination of text and audio is really interesting. Could you just describe what their model is?
So Serial Box, so I think they do a couple of things interestingly. I think the first thing that they do that's interesting is it's serialized fiction, which is a very old idea. It's what Charles Dickens was doing, And I think that they've really returned to that idea of that's a really innate thing about humans. We want to get hooked by a story and follow characters over a long time. And there's something really powerful about waiting for the next installment. And then the other thing that's interesting is that they just really understand that people who read things, people are reading a lot these days. It's an absolute lie that people aren't reading or people are reading less. It's just that people are reading in a different way. One of the things I really love about Serial Box is that you can download a book on the app, you can start reading it, you can switch to audio, you can switch back to the app, and you can just do that seamlessly. So the book fits into your life however it needs to. I think that's really cool.
And then I'm keen to learn more about what it's like to work on a book, consciously knowing it's going to be an audio book as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I think that it's something that we should think about more often with all books, to be honest. Like, I think, so much of how people consume books happens in an audio way now. I do think it should just be something that we think about from the beginning. It was a real challenge with my money book because so much of it was graphs and illustrations and diagrams. It is very different thinking about a book from the beginning as audio. There was, when we were working on Jessica Jones, a lot of the editing work was about realizing that some things that work quite well as descriptions on the page just don't translate very well when you read them out loud. I think that made me a better writer. Like, I think it improved my style. I spent a lot more time reading stuff I was writing to myself. And I think I've tried to carry that through in the novel that I'm working on, because I think it just makes your prose cleaner.
And now Magpies is the new project with Dale, right? Is
Yeah,
that the
that's it.
next collaborative thing? And how's that process working and going to work?
I think very similar. I think there've been moments of coming together and then moments of working in parallel. Dale and I worked together. We wrote a short story together with Lauren Bjerkes a couple of years ago called "This Book Will Find You," which we are currently trying to adapt, the three of us together. So we know that we work well together. We know that we have very complementary skills. Dale has this incredible plot brain. Like he's really, really good at logic and detail. And he just comes up with these incredibly wild ideas, like big concepts. I really like getting lost in the weeds of the prose, and kind of like discovering stuff as I go along. But I'm a much messier writer. So how it's worked with Dale is that we've had these weeks where we work together very intensely. So we're having one of those weeks right now, actually. So I spent the whole morning on the phone with Dale or on a Google Meet call, and we were trying to solve kind of some core plot questions and figure out some stuff about character arcs. And then basically we'll take like a month between those weeks where we are very much together, where we will work very separately. So Dale is working on, so our novel is kind of a mix between a horror story and a true crime story. So Dale is working on the true crimey parts of it, and I'm working on the horror-y parts of it. And then, so we write separately, and then we'll come back together. And we just kind of keep doing that sort of movement and re-knitting it all back together. It's so fun.
And when you say you're writing different parts, are you literally writing different scenes or different kind of layers of the same scene?
A bit of both. So there are some parts of it that are more the stuff that Dale is good at doing. So, for example, a lot of the crime investigation stuff. So he will write the first draft of those scenes, and I will write the first draft of other scenes that are more me kind of natural scenes. And then afterwards, we will go and overwrite each other's scenes. So it's a bit of both.
And are you working kind of into a live collaborative, say, Google Doc or Notion document at the same time?
I mean, we've had this conversation before as well. My dream writing tool, I don't think has quite been invented yet, because my dream writing tool would be Google Docs, but in Markdown, like just very pure Markdown.
Nice. I'm with you.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, Google Docs has been our main thing. We also have, so I've been using Ulysses, which is a Markdown editor, to keep track of all of our notes and characters and places and stuff like that. And then we just have that kind of as the user interface layer over a bunch of Markdown files that are sitting in a Google Drive folder. So that's how we're keeping track of all the research. The manuscript itself is currently sitting in the world's longest Google Doc. I do feel like I am kind of hitting the limits of what I want Google Docs to do, though, because we've written a first draft and now we're kind of in editing mode, and we're doing a lot of shuffling of scenes, and that's proving quite onerous in Google Docs. So I am considering doing the bad thing and cracking open Scrivener. But I have this deep loathing of Scrivener because I hate that it's all a proprietary file format. But I want that pinboard, basically. I want to be able to have some meta information about each scene, and I want to be able to shuffle it around. Yeah, so we really have been using a hodgepodge of tools. It's the perfect tool. I've not found it yet. I would love to know if you have a better idea.
No, what I find interesting is wondering if there even is a perfect tool, like even platonically, like could there be a perfect tool, or are we now just in a world where every creator has to assemble their own toolkit for what they want, what they need themselves? In the publishing world, for instance, we've lived in a world where for 30 years, everyone's used exactly the same software to lay books out. It's been InDesign, before that Quark, before that probably PageMaker. And now that's just been exploded in the same way that web development tools have been exploded. And I suppose the same is now happening for writing and for any area of creative work. You don't get to find the perfect tool anymore. You have no choice but to figure this stuff out the hard way and assemble your own tool set.
Definitely. Look, I mean, there are definitely worse tools. The one thing that was tricky about I won't even say exactly which project it was, but one of the most recent kind of collaborative projects that I worked on is everything falls apart as soon as things go through an editor who is only comfortable working in Microsoft Word. Because
Very interesting.
as much as you and your other collaborators can get on the same page around, Google Docs is just objectively better than trying to maintain these file names that are like date version 3.1.2 final. And then let's just email these back and forth like cave people. But
It's a
as soon as
catastrophe.
it's a catastrophe. But the problem is, as soon as you hit the first person who will only work with Microsoft Word documents, your whole system is broken now.
So interesting. Literally this morning, we decided in my little team not to work with a particular editor because they said they wouldn't work in Google Docs because they're scared of it. And I was like, I don't want to force Google Docs on them, but it's now just absolutely fundamental to our team that
I
we won't
know.
email files, MS Word files to each other.
Totally
We've just
understand it.
learned too many times the hard way.
I mean, it was a real challenge with both of the money books, both the original one. Well, and in fact, there's now there's a few versions of it as well, because there's a UK version that's fundamentally rewritten, and there's a kids version. And there were some real challenges with that one because there's a lot of graphs and illustrations in the book, and it was very much typeset page by page. And the challenge is, so we made the South African version. And there were a whole bunch of edits that only rarely happened once it had already been typeset. So we were essentially editing PDFs. The only way I could edit them ultimately was I pulled them up on my iPad and I used my pencil to hand write notes on them, which felt like an insane way to be doing edits. But that's kind of what made sense because of the workflow that we were following. And then the problem was a few months later, we said, let's adapt this book for the UK, which felt like it should have been fairly simple, but it wasn't, because there were a whole bunch of edits that only existed in the PDF form. So we first had to literally go and copy and paste stuff out of the PDF back into an editable file before we could then go and start editing. And we didn't even learn our lesson, because then we had to do the same thing again when it was the kids' book. I was just like, why is this a thing? This is an objectively insane way for books to work. And it has made me feel like the next book, I would be very wary ever again writing a book that required that much page by page typesetting for that reason.
I love hearing you talk about this, Sam, because you're someone who's come to publishing from a software background to some extent, and to you this must seem so inconceivable, and yet what you've just described is literally the way things are done in the vast majority of publishing companies in the whole world, and it's astonishing. And I think there are reasons. I think they have to do with some very big systemic problems with the way money and skills move in and through publishing. But there still are the cause of so much waste. It's just breathtaking.
I think that you really put your finger on it just now when you said a lot of this comes back to these quite deep questions about what is the business model of publishing and what is the role of publishers in this incredibly different world now. I've had only the utmost respect for everyone that I've worked with at my publisher. And they're a very traditional publisher in many ways, but every single person who I have worked with there has been just an absolute expert at what they do and has been so committed and so full of passion for books, because heck, you have to be, right? No one's in this for the money. I think it just really has been so visible how complex their job has become and how tight their margins are. And I think it really helped me as a writer when I understood what my publisher's role was. And I understood, like, let them do the things that they are great at doing, and the rest is going to have to be on me. They were incredible at distribution. They were amazing at firstly identifying that my book needed to exist. They were able to create an incredibly beautiful product, and they were able to get it into every bookstore. And they were also great at the traditional PR stuff, which I wouldn't have known, where to start. And that did make a difference. They got the book, they got extracts printed in magazines back before all the magazines had to close because COVID. they did all of those pieces so well. The things that I realize the publishers are not, they just don't have the capacity to do are a lot of the other stuff that marketing has become in 2020, which is putting out content and building that community around the book. And I don't think that any publisher actually could do that. I think that really has to come out of, it has to be an extension of the project. So it has to be out of you.
I also wanted to ask a little bit about your working with Dale and cover design, because of course he's also this extraordinary cover designer, and curious to know about the branding around Manage Your Money, because that's a really strong visual brand as well. Where did that design happen?
So a big part of why the book has been so charming, the money book, was because I worked with, again, my friend who I just love hanging out with, who's an incredible artist called Nana Fenter. Nana did all of the book illustrations. She did the cover design. She, we worked with her again on the kids' book, and so there's even more illustrations, and they're just so charming. I know she's made some Book Dash books before as well.
She's amazing.
She's so great. Yeah. I think something that was really powerful, Jonathan Ball were really great about letting me guide a lot of those things. I had a very clear vision for what I wanted my book to be, and I really wanted it to be as special as I could make it. I really believe in the idea of polishing the underside of the drawers. So, thinking about making everything as excellent as you can make it, even the things that you don't think matter. So I really thought about everything. I thought about who I wanted to do the cover. I thought about the illustrations. I thought about as many of the parts of it that I could. And I am a bit of a control freak as part of it. But I really think that it helped. It helped to care about those things. I don't think the book would be half as special as it is if it weren't for all of the whimsy that Nana's illustrations add to it. And I think that's been true with all of these other projects. Like, writing a novel is really hard, and it's difficult to keep the motivation up. And knowing that I'm accountable to Dale, and that if I write a scene, it means that then I get to sit down with Dale and discuss that scene, and that's going to be super fun. That's the best motivation that I've found. Yeah, like that's the magic, I think. That's the thing that makes it worthwhile for me. Have you and Dale/Joey discussed the cover of Magpies yet? I mean, I think he's going to have to do it. It would be weird if he didn't. The book that we're writing features a lot of kind of found objects. It's a little bit like night film. We've been very inspired by a book by Grady Hendrix called My Best Friend's Exorcism, which has a lot of newspaper articles and other little kind of interesting marginalia. So our book is set in 1996. We're writing about how the horrors of being a teenage girl in 1996. So a lot of what we're creating is kind of this extra found objects that enrich the picture of who the characters are. A little bit like the video game Gone Home. That's been another real reference for us, or touch point. So Dale, it's really helpful that Dale is both an amazing writer and also an incredible designer, because he's kind of adding all of these illustrations, all of these cool, fake articles and mixtapes that the characters have made each other, just like really enriching it. It's so fun. It's so fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have you already got a publisher connection, or is that also something you have to figure out still?
We're at this point, we're very much just still writing the draft. We haven't started thinking about those things yet.
And from what you've kind of been through already, working with different people, as we've said, these are all lovely people in publishing. Do you have a sense of like where and what kind of team will make it work? I always feel publishers who pass up great books get a bad rap. It's easy to say, oh, so-and-so turned down J.K. Rowling. But as a publisher, if you don't know you can make something a success, then you're right to pass on it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That fit with the publisher is really, really important.
I believe it is. Yeah, I believe it is. So, I mean, something that I have considered is I have considered self-publishing. I would never have if I hadn't been through the journey of promoting a book already. But I have, and I think I have a clearer idea now of what all the pieces of a book are. And a lot of what I talk about in the personal finance space is about the need to sort of be your own sugar daddy. as much as you can and be able to support your own dreams because you can't rely on other people. You know, the publishing world is such a competitive one, especially fiction. And even though I've had some success in the nonfiction space, I am not absolutely confident that I could definitely find a publisher for this book, because who knows? You know, it is such a difficult game, and you really have to have produced something excellent. I really love knowing that part of why I have put so much effort into building my own community is because I want to know that they will support future projects that I do, and that they will come with me on whatever ride I end up going on. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's not to say that I wouldn't try to get a traditional publisher. I mean, I think if you can, that's definitely a win. But, you know, I've been in the kind of pitching hell in TV and movie land for the last year and a half, and I've pitched, you know, these 3 shows to so many different people, and it is very competitive. There are so many amazing writers in the world, and I think part of what I've thought about in building my own community is I'm really committed to being a writer, not just be someone who wrote one book once. And that means, to some extent, treating my own writing career like a business and making sure that I am building my own audience if I need it.
Thank you so much. I have learned a lot. That's been absolutely fascinating.
Oh, brilliant. It was a really fun chat. Thank you.
Thank you for spending your time with us. You can be part of the show if you send us your own bookmaking stories, topics, and conundrums, and you can do that at howbooksaremade.com. If you haven't already, please subscribe in your podcast player and leave a review. It really helps others find out about the show. How Books Are Made is supported by Electric Bookworks, where my team and I make books all day, every day, in sunny Cape Town, South Africa.